Let's welcome our next speaker, Roselyn Baah, whose passion for building a community for professionals led her to build the GRC Network. The network is a community for professionals in governance, risk and compliance within financial services for knowledge sharing, career advancement and increasing diversity and inclusion. Ms. Baah is currently a Compliance Oversight Officer and Money Laundering Reporting Officer at a London-based boutique asset management firm. She has extensive experience in building up the compliance framework and heading the department in small, medium-sized investment firms. She remains determined to impart this knowledge to the next generation, especially those from underrepresented backgrounds, through various workshops, events, and public speaking engagements.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this session. I know that we have lots of people all around the world listening in on this, so thank you for joining the session. This session is going to talk about diversity in compliance more than just lip service. So diversity is always seen as comes with a huge mandate, an uncomfortable subject for some to discuss. It's difficult to understand and unravel what it comes with, whether the actions, how do you escalate issues, and it's something that a lot of firms are still trying to understand. So in my presentation today, which is going to be about 15 minutes or so, I'm going to talk about what diversity is. I'm going to talk about what we can do, the challenges that we have to address these issues, what compliance role can play in regards to addressing these issues, and the importance of also empowering underrepresented groups who are not necessarily feeling empowered to speak about these issues. So what is diversity? Diversity is all about culture, and culture is something that is intrinsic to the DNA of a firm. To establish culture, it's about fostering and cultivating the right behaviors, the right actions, putting in place certain programs which facilitates this. And so diversity is established where there's a culture that has been established to include different people that are coming from different backgrounds, be it age, gender, race, their mental and physical wellness, their experience, their personality quirks, and just a whole list of things that are unique to us. And I think that's the importance of recognizing that diversity touches on so many areas. I think there are certain topics that always are at the forefront of these topics, and they are important, but it's important to address the fact that it really spreads across various areas. And so today I'm hoping that at the end of this presentation, diversity will be seen as not this huge agenda, and in order to move away from just the lip service, it needs to be reflected in the culture. And the way that we do that is something I've coined as taking small progressive steps. So the small actions that we take in order to create this inclusive culture that takes account our differences. And so diversity is something that is a societal issue. So by default of that is an extension within the workplace and in compliance. So let's look at some insights into how compliance has dealt with diversity thus far. So the ICA issued a survey in 2020, and the idea was to gain some understanding on where we are when it comes to dealing with diversity and inclusion issues. And this was around the Black Lives Matter movement 2 years ago. And it had some interesting responses when this survey went out. So it found out that 38% had experienced discrimination at some point in their careers, and these were people within the compliance and regulatory field. There's 50% of those that completed the poll that said that their company is fully committed to diversity and inclusion. 37% said more should be done to advance with D&I, and 13% said enough has not been done at all to address these issues. So from this, we see that we are making some improvements in the compliance industry. For example, we're seeing more women in the industry. However, there's still a lot that we need to do. And there's a long way for us to go in order to normalize these things and reflect them at every single level within the business. So how do we go about with addressing it? And for me, that starts with addressing the fact that diversity does not look the same. We need to identify that even though there might be similarities in groups, their experiences differ. For example, take myself. I am a Black woman originally from Ghana. And when I came to the UK, I was oblivious to race for quite a while. And this was because I grew up in an environment where issues that were more obvious to me were economic related and gender related. And so my pain points were more so looking at those areas. And I only became more educated on it once I started to have my own race struggles within my career. And so if you compare my experience to a British-born Black woman, who we might have some similarities in our experiences and in our challenges in the workplace, there will be differential factors in terms of where they've grown up, what they've been exposed to. And so when it comes to addressing the topic of diversity, it's very important for firms to not bucket groups and really look at the issues. So for example, I know that a general term that's always used is BAME, where it's looking at Black, Asian, minority, ethnic groups. And although these groups are sort of gathered together for a purpose, their respective issues and respective nuances of what they are dealing with is very different. And so where companies bundle these issues together in a way to address it, you completely miss it in terms of actually being truly effective and going further than just the lip service of what to do in order to meet the pain points of these groups. And so there is no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to dealing with diversity. I believe that it starts with a conversation. It starts with identifying what are the issues that are speaking at the heart of the firm. And in order to identify these issues as well, that requires having open and honest conversations with those that are being affected. And I believe that in order to do those, it really boils down on the culture that the firm has, establishing a speak-up culture and having that open dialogue. In general, those from underrepresented groups sometimes find it quite difficult to speak about their concerns within a business. And whether discrimination issues, harassment, because of the sensitivity of the matter. And then on the other side of that as well, those that lack the confidence in those subjects, out of fear of saying the wrong things, just don't say anything or acknowledge certain differences. And so we end up in a place where the right conversations are not being had and there's not true understanding of what these issues are. So in order to move past the lip service, in order to ensure that the initiatives that are being put in place are actually addressing issues, it requires firms taking steps to create safe spaces where these things can be easily talked about. In the last few years, when we've had the Black Lives Matter movement, when we've had the Me Too movement, they have normalized some of these conversations in the workplace. And in fact, they've empowered people speaking on sexual harassment in the firm, discrimination issues in the firm, racial experiences that people have experienced. But it's really down on the firms to build this momentum and foster that culture. And so what I've said, small progressive steps, small progressive actions that can be taken can involve the creation of internal networks, which serves as a safe space of people being able to share their concerns. There can be informal ways of the relationship that someone has with their manager and sharing their concerns or speaking to HR. But it's important that when these matters are shared, it is taken on board. And also being able to have formal channels, such as whistleblowing lines. And the idea of this is that people are able to share their concerns without not feeling like they're having a fear of repercussions for what they're sharing. So this goes a long way of showing to employees within a business that the firm is committed to fostering that inclusive culture and hearing people out and acting on those. Another challenge when it comes to diversity is that there's diversity is always seen as a sort of a remit or the burden of HR and the leadership team. And although the leadership team plays a significant role in terms of setting the mandate, the vision, when it comes to diversity, and HR also plays the executor role or the gatekeeper, it's very important for us to recognize that we all play a role in building an inclusive culture at every level in a firm through our behaviors. It is in looking at what the tone has been set from the top and how this trickles down throughout every level in the firm is where you're able to see whether the firm is actually living and breathing these policies and they're not sort of standard policies that have been put out or lip service or token gestures. And so that is where we get to assess those raw impacts that's happening. But this is the interesting point where it creates room for people like us, so compliance, to come in. Because for HR and leadership team to do an effective job, I believe compliance plays a role with that in terms of designing, implementing, and also holding them accountable to these policies that have been put out. So there are various ways that compliance can play a role with ensuring that those in charge of owning these areas are equally instilling it at every level within the firm. And that can be done in various ways, but I will focus on just two today. So it starts with monitoring the employee responses. We're seeing more roles such as ethics officer, conduct officer, that roles that are being created, where compliance functions are working with HR in order to really assess what are we seeing in response to the policies, in response to programs that have been put out, in response to the training that's been received. And it's from there that the firm needs to then take on more data and understand exactly what it is supposed to do. Another thing is assessing recruitment efforts, which is a big part of how to implement diversity and inclusion efforts within a firm. So recruitment efforts is very important for firms to really assess whether there are any barriers to hiring or there are any barriers to retention. So when we take barriers to hiring, for instance, unconscious bias is always a big part of it. And addressing things like unconscious bias through training, through, as Sandra mentioned, when you're interviewing, how does that panel look like? And it's important for firms to recognize these things because we all also have, every single person has an element of unconscious bias in them. And then when it comes to looking at, retention efforts, what is the data showing us? What is the firm actually making sense of, when you find a lot of, let's say, diverse talent, more so on the junior level within a firm, but they're not progressing. And so trying to make sense of that. And these can be done with, be it in surveys, obtaining feedback from staff, where you're seeing an increase in turnovers, trying to do exit interviews that are really dissecting what are the issues that are being left out. And so it's important for compliance to work with senior leaders to actually, when these policies are issued, they are taking the efforts as well to engage, to understand that they are working. The other part of it is ensuring that employees are being held accountable for upholding the firm's values and policies. And this is a way of influencing behaviors of everyone within the firm from the top to the bottom. So compliance can hold everyone accountable to ensure that these policies are actually living and breathing in the firm. And as well as when you have senior leaders, they are serving as good role models for these policies. So as said, it encourages certain behavior, but enforcement is also part of that. And that is holding people accountable when things have gone wrong, but also enforcing through training and through education. But all of these, for them to be effective, it also requires compliance to be diverse themselves. And what I would like to highlight here is the importance of cognitive diversity. And this is an area that doesn't receive much attention, but it's the inclusion of diverse range of backgrounds, expertise, thinking, different problem styles. And it's great because it means that there are compliance teams that are bringing different perspectives to the table. And as I said before, diversity is just not about gender, it's not just about race, it's about people thinking differently, people's mental and their physical wellness, and how all of these impact our day-to-day and how we're working. So then such teams like that are able to offer unique perspectives when addressing D&I issues and managing those risks. And they are a lot more effective at seeing things from a wider lens and seeing things in different angles. So it reduces any blind spots. And the firm is able to take proactive measures when it comes to addressing diversity issues, let's say through training, communication, even in the language that is being used when we're putting out compliance programs, when we're putting out D&I programs, and so that these things are speaking directly to the issues within the firm. And then there's also reactive steps that are taken towards, discouraging bad behavior and calling things out. And these are different ways that are able to get the buy-in of employees within the business as well, because it shows that the firm has a culture of zero tolerance. The firm is committed to fostering a particular type of behavior within the business. So what I'd like to talk to you about now is what this GRC network is doing. So at the beginning, I mentioned that I would like to mention the importance of empowering those from underrepresented groups. And I think that that's something that it's not looked at that much. And this is because diversity is, or the business is responsible for creating that environment. But I think also sometimes we, as those that are from underrepresented groups, you go through various changes. You go through, be it in the environment that you're working in, there's a certain level of empowerment that you need in order to not be defined by just the identifying factors about you. So with the GRC network, this is what we're focusing on. Generally, our mandate is to provide career advancement, knowledge sharing, and increase diversity and inclusion within the GRC space, specifically for financial services. But in our efforts to address diversity and inclusion, it's really about addressing the issues that we're seeing underrepresented groups go through, and be able to provide the right resources to change their mindset and also empower them. So we do this in 3 ways. We do this by providing visibility and accessibility to senior leaders from diverse backgrounds within GRC. And sometimes the reality is that it takes seeing someone that looks like you for you to be motivated and for you to feel empowered to go for something. And it creates that sense of community, which is what we're doing, in order to network, in order to find mentorship from senior leaders or more experienced professionals. And then we also do this by empowering our members to own their differences and their experiences and navigate these related challenges. And we try to do these through events and resources that we provide to build their technical and their soft skills. So with the technical skills, we try to pick a regulation, for instance, and we try to get industry experts that will dissect these, how to go about it, educate on their understanding, but also equip them to feel more empowered in performing their jobs. And then when it comes to the soft skills, we create a safe space where we will invite experienced professionals to come in and speak on matters or concerns that we're seeing from our members, and to give their guidance and support in how they can navigate these challenges. And for us, we see this as a way of changing mindsets, empowering them, but also ensuring that they are shining within their firms, regardless of the lack of diversity within their firm, or the firms are making, the right efforts in order to build that inclusive environment. Lastly, we bring more awareness to the compliance industry, to those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. And this is something that we focus more on when it comes with schools and universities. And for us, the idea is that it's important to empower those from underrepresented groups very early. And we do this by doing engagement, so there's things like this, and so speaking engagements, workshops, and we bring more awareness to the commercial side of business and the regulatory side of it. So there will be sessions that we've done on commercial awareness and be able to also shed more light on the opportunities that are in compliance, which a lot of people still are not aware of. And so for us, the outcome is that we are encouraging a more younger, diverse talent to go into the compliance industry. And this is something that we're working with firms. So I'm happy to speak to any firm as well that is looking into increasing their diverse talent when it comes to their graduate schemes, etc. And this is all that we're trying to do in order to change the narrative and also empower those that are being affected when it comes to diversity and inclusion matters. We recently did an event on women in GRC, and it was great to hear of the various stories of senior leaders. And it was great to get them to empower our members, especially the women in the audience, on how to navigate their journeys in order to succeed in their career. So today I've spoken a lot about how we go about with dealing with diversity and how we go further than just the standard policies. But ultimately, I want you to take away that it is about culture. And so for it to be done, the policies need to speak to the issues within the firm. And you need raw engagement with the issues that have been identified through reviews, through discussions, through education, training, etc. And then there needs to be accountability enforcement for it, because where there's non-compliance, you need, in order to help hold people accountable. So I hope you found this useful. And to close, the question I have for you is that what are the small progressive steps that you can take towards building an inclusive culture? Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has.